So let's dive right in with the Label Matrix free webinar. First, we're going to start off on how to use the object creation tools by using the wizard. And we'll just use this once just because the wizard is the same for all of the objects that you can create, and we kind of want to keep it nice and short. So as you can see here, you can select any type of object that you'd like to create. That's available here on the left-hand side, which is text, paragraph, picture, barcode, 2D barcode, text art, and rich text fields, as well as the shapes. They are singled out here, whereas they are all together in this particular object right here. First one we're going to be starting with is the text one, just for the example. And as you can see here, this is just basically a section of the label matrix wizard that's going to be going over different types of symbols that you may see, especially when dealing with barcodes. And this one is more or less, you'll see this one for the human readable on a lot of things, or the options for displaying certain particular strings of text. This section here, turtle means graphical, printer means printer resident. That's all it really means. All right, going over this image wizard here, you can see that you can select your font, the point size, and the style, whether it's regular, bold and italicized, or italicized. You can also go over the width of the particular object, which in most cases allows you to condense it, which kind of squishes it together. Or you can expand it, and that kind of gives it this exploded view where it looks like it's a little bit stretched out. And of course, you can use the effects such as underline, strike through, and all caps. In this particular section, you can choose the foreground and background coloring. In this example, we'll just keep it the way it is. As more often than not, you will be using monochromatic particular palettes, just because thermal printers generally print in black and white and grays. There are a few Epson models that do print in red. However, if you're not using one of those models, I would recommend just not really touching the color section here, as it's not really going to do you much good. The data origin allows you to choose how you want to utilize this particular object. As you can see, there are several. For this particular one, we're just going to go ahead and use constant information. This is a text object, and as you can see, it gives us a little preview here, and it's basically just like it sounds. Fixed information. It doesn't change until you've manually updated it. So this is not a variable. This is constant or fixed or static information. There you go. And then now you can give it a name. So this is the name is for the object itself. And then of course you can name it whatever you like. Otherwise, just leave it be. It doesn't really affect how the object performs or functions. And then finally down here, you can have a description field, which is essentially a glorified notepad. So whatever you put in here is going to go in for the description of the object. So if you ever were to look at the description field for the object again, you'd be able to see whatever note that you've left behind here. And let's say you just wanted to put it in there for the purposes of notating something or marking something like, hey, don't forget to type in this particular thing. You can disable the image and put it on the label, and a disabled image is basically a non-printable image. It won't print. Then we can finally go over our rotation as well as orientation, or justification rather, I should say. And the rotation just kind of spins the actual object on its anchor point. And currently we have it on the left, which is why you see it kind of moving around the S. If we were to do the right side, it would move around the E instead, as you can see. And if it's in the center, it's just going to pretty much spin like a propeller, essentially. So we're just going to leave it where it would normally be, 0 degrees to the left. And then, of course, you can see here, finally, that we can choose where to place the object. We can place it by our mouse, which I generally recommend doing if you're using the wizard, or you can place by position. And the position is just the way that sounds. As you can see here, 4.7 by 1.8. So essentially it'll find 4.7 and 1.8, and it would put it roughly right where my cursor is. And that's one way to do it if you are building something specific and it needs to be like, by a ½ inch and a ½ inch in the upper left-hand corner of the label, and it must go there because this is what the spec sheet says. If that's the case, then that you definitely want to type it up there. And you can use this and place it directly where you need it to be up there, essentially. And then you can do vertical text, which unfortunately you can't see in the example, but if we go back and then next, or if we were to finish it, you would see that it'd be vertical instead of horizontal as it is now. But right now I'm just going to do place by mouse and go ahead and put it there. That is pretty much how you create a text object. Next portion we'll be going over is how to add a printer driver. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can go to File and Printer Setup, or you can click this particular setting right here, this little button right here next to the currently selected printer driver. And that brings up this window right here. And what this allows you to do is install, remove, or change the settings of installed printer drivers. Now, I will mention that it will only affect the L drivers and X drivers. Windows drivers you cannot change through our software. For that, you'll have to actually navigate to the control panel, go into devices and printers, and then simply go through the printing preferences and then change the settings there. So even if you can get into the settings through here by clicking this in here, just keep that in mind, that you cannot change Windows drivers through our software. So let's go ahead and add a printer driver. And for an example, we're going to be using, let's see here, the ZM600, let's say. That one's pretty common. There it is. We'll use 300 DPI. Just make sure that when you're selecting your printer driver, you do have the right DPI. And we can give it an alias if we wish, and but we're not going to for this example. Otherwise, what will happen is just gives the name of the actual printer driver that you've selected. So the printer driver will be called ZM600 300 DPI on this port. And speaking pretty much of ports, we'll move on to this section, which is the port selection. Local is just like it sounds. It's anything you can physically connect to the actual PC. Additionally, it can be any localized IP addresses. UNC stands for Universal Naming Convention, and you've probably seen something like this where it was computer name and then slash and then printer name, something like that. So these are usually for shared out printers. You can certainly use these. Just make sure that they are set up properly to receive information as raw data or as raw text. You don't want to converting into anything using the Microsoft Windows drivers when setting up those particular types of shared ports, or shared drivers, I should say, rather. So just make sure that you're actually utilizing the proper way to set up a UNC connection to a shared printer. TCP/IP is just like it sounds. If you have an IP address, you can certainly type it in here and print to a network printer. But if you type it in this section, instead of making it a local IP port like we've done up here, you'll force direct access. And we're going to jump ahead a little bit, or kind of jump around a little bit. This is trying to make this as least confusing as possible, because I know we're covering quite a bit how to add a printer driver, all its ports, and now a third topic. But essentially, if you enable Windows print spooling, this is the best option that we suggest. And it's not always. It depends on the environment and how you're printing. But for the most part, generally, going through the Windows print spool is best. It allows you to stack up print jobs from multiple sources or multiple workstations. If anything goes wrong with the print job, you can simply clear it from the print queue in your computer. And of course, this allows you to actually snag the file that you're actually sending down to the printer in case you ever wanted to look at anything, or if you're attempting to print file layouts or something like that. It's very versatile. It's very handy. Now, without this selected, and if I were to just put in this IP address right here, up right in this section, it would force direct access. Now, the one good thing is that basically all the information is being sent directly from the workstation to the printer, because the two have a bridge communication at that point. They're in bidirectional communication. The downside is that during that communication, no other workstation can send a print job to it. If it happens to fail, then the process pretty much ends. You may end up having to clear the print job, but you'll have to do it from the printer because there is no queue for you to clear it from. And the third and final one, the reason why I probably wouldn't recommend direct access unless you have your computer and your printer set up for it, is that more often than not, if you're printing very, very large batch jobs, the computer connection to the printer can time out. And in the middle of that timeout, you lose your place in your print job. So if you were printing like 1,000 labels and it happened at like label 500 and it just turned off or whatever like that, unfortunately, you can't just pick up where you left off because there is no reference point for the particular print job. So you'd have to either start over or manually set your counters and all the rest of that jazz to the 500 mark and then go on from there. So we're going to go ahead and use local. And I'm just going to put file here because it doesn't really matter. Say next. Here you can change the printer setting options. Unfortunately, we won't be doing that because there are far too many printer drivers to go over and far too many custom environments from the end user. What I recommend doing is just kind of hitting the setup button once you have this printer driver installed and just rooting around in there and keeping an eye on the settings that you're selecting, testing them out, and tweaking them as necessary so that you get the proper output that you're looking for. Now, to remove the printer driver, as you can see, all you have to do is highlight the printer driver, hit remove, and hit OK. For the Windows drivers, keep in mind if you want to remove them, you'll have to go to the devices and printers under the control panel and simply remove the driver. And that pretty much covers up how to add a printer driver. So let's go over pretty much how to add a text object. We kind of already done the text object here. Just wanted to give you a visual of the actual window. So as you can see, here's your font, your general, your color, your position. Pretty much all those things we covered in the wizard. And then, of course, your data. Instead of choosing the data from this an entire page, it's pretty much just chosen from a list. And then you can type in the information here. And whatever you type in there, as you can see, it shows up the preview. And that's pretty much exactly what we did with this object. So we'll just move on down to the paragraph object, shall we? And the one new tab you have here is the power wrap option. You have a bullet or numbered list. You could have a hanging indent, which is kind of like having a stair-stepping, indent that kind of goes downwards. You could have text wrap. This is mainly for if you're trying to wrap text around images. If you choose the right 3 options here, you'll see that this actually becomes available, and you can choose the white space between it or ignore missing graphics or just write over it completely. Space between the lines basically is paragraph spacing or sentence spacing, so it's this line space in between each sentence, not in between each word. Just keep this as a friendly reminder, more or less. Scale to fit here allows you to essentially make the information that you're typing in there variable. Now let's say empty, so let me go ahead and put an example in there. So this is a paragraph field object. There we go, hit OK. And if you notice, what's happening is that the text is, or the font rather I should say, is scaling to fit the size of the actual paragraph object that we have here. And that is essentially what the scale to fit does. Basically, you can set your maximum point size and minimum point size, and then how many characters you would display into this particular line for, let's say, so this top one. So it's 72. So only a maximum of 4 characters would be used to make it 72 point. And once you go beyond the 5th character, it would drop down to something in between. And it's basically just minor scaling. So you can choose how large and how small you'd like it to be based upon how many characters have been typed in. So in this respect, I would just pretty much leave it as it is. And for this actually example, now that I think about it, actually I'm going to take it off just so you can see what happens when you don't have it on. So you'll notice that it looks like it's kind of hiding a portion of the word, and it certainly is. So we want to make sure we do that. And as you notice, there's also a dotted line along the side, or around, I should say, the paragraph object as opposed to the regular text object. This is how it denotes and you know that it's a paragraph object. All right, moving on down here, let's go on to barcode creation. So we will choose the data to be constant again. Barcode, we'll just go over this one as this is the newer tab that you haven't seen before. As you can see, we have many different symbologies to choose from. My apologies. And we're going to use the code 39, 3 of 9. Now you can choose the height manually or stretch it out with a keyboard and mouse, and sort of grab on the corners and stretch it out and to see where the size that you'd like it to be. But if you need the barcode to be a certain size, then I would recommend just typing it in here, and that will set the height. Just keep in mind that some barcodes need to be a certain height, otherwise they become unscannable. It kind of depends on the scanner, but for the most part, you should be good generally building whatever type of barcode you'd like. Now, as for the density, I would stick away from ultra high and very low. Ultra high is very condensed, ultra low is very expanded. Unless you have scanners that handle these types of densities, then I probably would leave it somewhere in between the low and very high. Those ones aren't very bad. Because the white space that's being scanned in between the barcodes, in between those bars, I should say, need to be a certain distancing apart. And of course, this density can change, and they're all good densities. All of these barcodes should scan to a degree, depending on what type of scanner you have. But just keep in mind that you want to make sure that that the barcode can be scanned overall. That's the ultimate goal. And you can try different densities if you find that you're not able to scan a certain barcode, because this also kind of pretty much deals with the narrow bar width of the barcode, how the spacing in between the bars, and that's pretty much what density is. And sometimes, yeah, if the density is too large, it goes outside the sweeper range of the scanner, and then it becomes non-scannable. It's a very odd thing, but this is how you would tweak that. The checksum, you can put. We're not going to be using that on this one, but you can use them. This one was a modulo 43, and essentially all that means is that that's the type of algorithm that's going to take the string of information that we've typed in, and based on that string, it's going to give us a unique value, the check character, or the check digit. And this is fairly helpful if you're trying to have a check digit for any specific reason. Let's say, I'm trying to build a point of sale system, and I'm typing into the inventory list, and we're putting up product numbers, and I type in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it gives me a check digit of 9, let's say. If I were to give you, who works at a different facility, but under the same company, that same string of information, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you could type that into your system, and as long as it's using the same algorithm that mine is, it would come up with the check digit of 9. That way we both know we're talking about the same product. And that's essentially the reason for check digits and checksums. And here we can choose where the human readable goes, and that's this little section under here. And there are our little turtles there that we were talking about earlier in the wizard that you can choose whether it's graphical or printer resident, essentially, or something that determines that it's printer resident, or graphical rather, I should say. You can even choose none. But yeah, this is basically where you would decide where you'd like the human readable to go. And then, of course, the ratio. This is another, like a mil.spec, another way to adjust the narrow bar width. So as you can see, the bars are getting thicker the more you go down, the higher you go up, the thinner they get. This would also be included in your spec sheet if you have one for any barcode that you're attempting to build. Essentially, if it says, oh well, it needs the ratio of the bars to the white spaces, my apologies, need to be 2 to 1. Then you would select 2 to 1, and there you go. But in this example, we'll just leave it 3 to 1, and because just for the simple fact of so that we can just get the barcode on the label. The supplement section, this only shows up depending on the type of symbology that you've chosen. It's kind of contextual. So once you get to it, if someone is requesting a barcode that has a supplement to it, you should have that information to just type in here, and you should be good, or you should be able to select the option necessary. Data identifier, down here, is comparable to building manually, essentially. The application identifiers that you would use in GS1 barcodes. It's not necessary to do it in this particular example, so we'll just leave this one blank. And then bearer bars are similar to exactly what they sound like. They are bearer bars for barcodes that include them. So let's go ahead and place this on the label. And it looks like we didn't put any data in there, and that's quite all right. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. And now we have ourselves a barcode. And let's go ahead and do a 2D barcode. Leave it as a data matrix. Let's go ahead and throw in some data. Now, the type is the same as the regular barcodes. You can do linear or 2D, but it's the same similar kind of sort of options. It won't be the same symbologies, but it works in a similar manner. Density is the very same, although with 2D barcodes, I would say very low isn't that bad, but if ultra high, as you can see, it's just a little dot. So I probably wouldn't mess with the ultra high, because everything is very compact. Ultra low is kind of like an exploded view, so it's not that bad. Error correction, this will be in the spec sheet of the barcode if necessary, otherwise you can just leave it at default. But what error correction does is essentially if you were to lose a portion of the barcode and it was no longer there, like it got ripped off in shipping or something like that, it basically just means that you're able to reverse engineer the barcode with the scanner based on the check digits that are left behind in the barcode. Simply saying because the scanner can read it and the algorithm goes, okay, well, if the check digit is this here and this here and this here, then that must only mean that the string of information it came from is this. And it allows you to basically scan a barcode that's not complete, it's only a partial, and still get the same information. Very cool stuff. You can also choose whether or not to to display it as a rectangle. So we can go ahead and turn that off. Use it as a square. Go ahead and put it up there, and there you go. And there is your 2D barcode. Go down to shapes. These ones are pretty self-explanatory for the most part. Pretty much just click the button. You can choose, the height and the width, whether, the vertical and the horizontal is where it'll be displayed. You can choose the thickness of the object itself, as well as even fill it in with some color if you'd like. So if we just go ahead and grab this and just put this around the barcode like so, there we go. And of course it's not going to be very centered because I'm just kind of doing the slapdash style, but you get the point. And there we go. Of course you can do lines as well. So if we were to just go ahead and do the same, there you go. You just build yourself whatever you like. It's basically basic shapes. Let's move on to the picture object. We'll go over the different types in a different webinar. But the two that you would like to know about, because we do go over database and keyboard and prompt in the advanced webinar, but embedded and linked is just like it sounds. Embedded means if you add an image, it gets saved to the actual file itself, and it's within the file. You should never lose it. You don't have to keep it in a specific location for it to be rendered properly or something like that. It's just with the label template itself. A linked file is the opposite of what we just said. It's pretty much it's pointing externally to a location of a linked file. So you'll see a directory path appear in here once you've selected an actual image. So let's just say select the coffee image or something like that. Notice how it puts in the absolute path and then plus the name of the image. If you were to move this image in a linked file, or change the name of it, or change the extension type of it, then that particular image that was set here prior to that change would break. So generally we recommend just embedding it And that's it. I mean, that's pretty much how you add an image object to a label matrix. Pretty straightforward. The last two are a little bit more complicated to say to a degree, but it's all contextual. It depends on what you're using it for and how you're using it. So as you can see, we have two new tabs here. Let's just go ahead and put in some information. So this is text art. So there we go. And let's take a look at the shape. So we can choose this shape, and this section is kind of a little bit harder to understand, I guess, unless we go over this. So you can see exactly what I mean. So the shape is what your word bending is essentially going to look like. So you can use this little dial here and move that around, and the preview will show you. Or you can simply type in 0, 90 degrees, 180. Instead, let's see here. 360 doesn't exist because if you go to 360, it's essentially back at 0. So you just want to leave that be. And of course, you can change the angle of the sweep, like how hard it curves, more or less. Whether it's the alignment is pretty much the same thing as the anchoring point, like we were talking about beforehand with other text objects. You got the left, centered, right, and then justified. You can choose where the actual bend begins. It can be at any character, at word boundaries, or at the character turn, if you would like to have character turns in there. You can also do the character spacing, whether it's dense and kind of condenses, and then goes loose, and then kind of expands like the exploded view, or you can even create your own some custom spacing then. And then you can rotate the characters so they become vertical, or you can even rotate them counterclockwise to push them outwards. And that's where shape becomes a little bit more relevant and understandable here, because currently it's in the shape of an ellipse, and of course you can choose any one of these options that you have available here. You can choose whether or not it has a background or a border, and whether or not you want to fill that in, or how it's bordered essentially. But let's go ahead and just place that on the label right here. It's going to look a little wonky. That's pretty normal. So once you stretch it out, though, however, notice if you make it just a normal text box that's way larger than necessary, then it's not going to do its little bendy act. But as you can see, this is how you would use or utilize text art, is you can kind of bend it around stuff, depending on how you build it, of course, and where you set up your breaks. But essentially, this is the function of text art. And the last one we'll be going over is a rich text field. Now, don't put anything in this section, and once you're in here, you'll notice that it's a familiar paragraph field box, with the only exception that we've enabled rich text formatting, and now we just need to jump into the Edit Rich Text Field Editor. And I'll bring up this message here. So let's say you were in like a chemical or perhaps maybe a scientific position, and you guys need to do periodic elements or things of that nature, or any atomic level sort of categorizing, where you would have to maybe call out to the atomic structure of a particular component or something like that. This is pretty popular for that, I would say. So let's just make that a little bit bigger, and let's go ahead and use these functions right here. This is the main two that you would use this for. This is apparently sorry about that. having a dry throat issue. It's messing with me. So you can pretty much use these particular functions here, and basically make it super or sub. It allows it to make it above or below. My apologies. And as you can see here, this is how you would make like H2O, make it look like an actual H2O, as you would in like a textbook or something like that. We basically go ahead and hit exit. And this is why I mentioned don't put anything in this box here, is simply because you want all that information to be available for you. You probably could manually type all that in, but I'm not sure why would you. So let's go ahead and just place that on the label. And there we go. It should look exactly like we'd like it to look. And that pretty much kind of covers the Label Matrix free webinar.